Three. Hi, we're Geeks Assembled, and Alex and Susan have joined me today to talk about a 1985 movie, which was Cher's first leading role. Yes, that Cher's first leading role in a big blockbuster movie, shall we say. Also co-starring Sam Elliott and Eric Stoltz. We are talking Mask, which is loosely based on a true story. Was it Rocky Dennis who had facial features? His 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 bone structure was growing, wasn't it? Abnormal rate, so shall we say?
Yeah, he had too much calcium
Yeah,
growing in his skull and head region. So, and unfortunately, he was also at the age that they couldn't do operations safely.
yeah. I mean, Rocky Dennis did actually exist. He passed away. I think he was round about in 1978. I think it was. So the dates in this movie are quite wrong.
Yeah.
Um,
But it was before he was 20.
yeah. But this movie is sort of set in 1980. So, but we'll get into that later. So let's have our opening thoughts from these two over there about Mask.
Okay. I remember seeing this a couple of times. Of course, again, this is a biopic, sort of loosely based. Rocky Dennis, he had Lionitis, basically, which means that the too much calcium deposits. It's a rare condition. Uh, Too much calcium. The brain is also being uh, squeezed a little bit, so he would have a lot of headaches, and he was supposed to have vision problems and hearing problems as well. Um, Again, I don't know how much is true, how much is not. I looked on Wikipedia. One of the pictures he had, of course, you couldn't really film that, especially back then, where his eyes were more over where his cheekbones would be. Um, so you couldn't do that in 1980s and have the actor work and respond. So it's already a little exaggerated as already. But it could have been a lot worse. I understand where they were going. I understand what they were trying to do. It is basically low key. It is basically realistic. I'm not sure about the biker gang. I'm not sure about her lifestyle per se, Cher's character, because I can't, I can't relate to that. I can relate to how doctors were very depressing back then. They weren't sensitive at all, like they are now, at all. They didn't really care about the patient. They only cared about the condition and the problems. They also didn't have the technology like you do now, where you can make a very small incision and basically, with just a little 10 minutes of work, solve the most problems. They didn't have the x-rays and the sonograms and the MRIs and other wonderful technology that could see everything without being invasive, without cutting the skin and opening you up and all that. Um, Again, from the 1930s to the 1980s, you had a lot of prejudice for people even wearing glasses. So when you're dealing with a physical disability, handicap, whatever you want to call it, or you're dealing with deafness, or you're dealing with blindness, or you're dealing with conditions and disabilities that could not be fixed, could not be assisted with any technology. There was a lot of prejudice, a lot of teasing from everybody. Um, so I agree with Cher's character in the sense of, if I listen to you guys, she says in the movie, if I listened to you guys, I would have had 18 funerals for my son already. Yeah, it was a different time. There was more prejudice. There was more showboating. That's why he also had the Elephant Man a few years earlier as a movie where he goes, I'm a human being. He may not be an attractive human being on the outside, but he was attractive just like this gentleman on the inside in the way he behaved. as opposed to, and there's also no guarantee, even if you have an operation, whether it's 1980 or 2019, there's no guarantee that an operation will be successful anyway. So he was sort of caught in a very, awkward situation. But in the movie, he's very human. He's very kind. He's very American. Again, this is a biker group, so you're going to have Bruce Springsteen and Steely Dan and Bob Seger and all
And
these
who
type
else?
of. Oh, I don't know who else.
The Grateful Gosh Darn Dead.
Okay, well, I'm not a fan. But again, this is also an American, movie. You have some famous people from Barney Miller, Night Court. You have Laura Dern, who's now famous again for Jurassic Park and Star Wars, the new movies of Star Wars. Again, this was before she became really big. She does a very good portrayal of blind people, and there is no mention of the other senses are sharper, none of that nonsense, too, which was a commonly held myth that just because you have a disability, everything else is stronger or smarter. And that's not true in every case. So I'll give it credit for trying to be as down to earth as possible. I'll give it credit for not glamorizing disability like Forrest Gump does, or giving it 10,000 catchphrases like Forrest Gump does. And it was more down to earth. Yeah, I think some of the fights and some of the sequence where the mother brings home a prostitute, I'm not sure about that either. But like I said, its heart is in the right place. It's sort of like an officer and a gentleman. It admits things. It has good characters. They're not totally fantastic, but I don't know how realistic the situations are. But they're not totally unrealistic either. This movie did face a lot of criticism. It is a little bit in your face, but it has to be. Otherwise, you might fall asleep during the movie. I do like the fact that for the most part, he's very good humored. He's very even keel. He doesn't get violent until the end, but it's not a huge scene. And we don't know if that has anything to do with his condition. He did die in his sleep. So, we don't know if his heart just stopped or his brain, unfortunately, the calcium in the skull was just too big for the brain and damaged the brain or the spinal cord, which is connected. But if that's the case, unless you're in the hospital, and even if you're in the hospital, you might pass away anyway. So you also have to think about, this is the 60s to the 80s again, where they didn't have the technology and the commitment to say, we're helping the patient as much as we can. We're not going to, be evasive and all that stuff.
Well, I'm really, I was really touched to hear Alex's story when we first started talking, and this is has a lot of similarities. The young man was really brilliant, and he was really charismatic, and he had something that was going to be sort of a struggle for his whole life. And so there is and Eric Stoltz nails it. He really gets that, and he shares that well. Good storyteller, good actor. And I know this is one of his first movies. He went on to do all those, Brat Pack 80s movies. And he was part of that whole gang of people who were doing all those movies together, kind of like, in the flow with John Ford and stuff like that.
John Hughes.
John Hughes. Thank you. Why do I never get that right? Anyway, and Cher, she was dramatic. Her acting was rock solid as well. She had a couple of songs in there with Eric. They sang together, and it was sort of that around the fire, one guitar, couple singers kind of thing, down home old timey music with their biker friends, and so that was cool. And let's see. I mean, you know, you got the foreshadowing with the two funerals that were in the movie ahead. And so that was really interesting. And then I mean, it would, you know, or Laura Dern, or, you know, Diana and his relationship, and, you know, how in the 80s, all those love stories, the parents would get in the way and say, heck no, you don't get to talk to my kid. And that just, you know, that happens so much back then. I mean, there were lots of chances that people had of getting together with somebody wonderful, but mom and dad would get in the way. And not entirely sure either direction that you know, how stupid that was, but I think that it was a good movie. I had seen it right when it came out, and then I saw it again on HBO later, and I remember crying through it one time. Like, I was just crying the whole way through the movie. And this time I watched it, it was more exultant, you know, and there was, you know, when you get to the Ripple song, that was a sweet, sweet, sweet addition. That is one of the Grateful Dead's most spiritual songs outside of their gospel songs. Gotta tell you, this Ripple has this beauty and this grace and this quietness to the song. And I only heard him play it once live, so, but you know, the drug lifestyle and the biker lifestyle and stuff like that was legit. And the kid collecting baseball cards and wanting to go on a road trip through Europe, I mean that showed his huge brain, you know. He wanted to go, you know, to these awesome places. Like, he put his thumbtack in Vienna, and he put his thumbtack in Berlin, and he put his thumbtack in Istanbul. I mean, he put his thumbtack in places which weren't on the, you know, on the TV at the time. So I mean, he was quite an amazing kid, and it was sad when he passed away. Over to you, Lee.
Thank you both for your opening thoughts there. Yeah, this movie is it's effective, powerful acting, to say the least. This is Cher's first leading role. She just blows you away. She's the powerhouse in acting in this movie, and this is the type of acting I like to see from Cher, not the cabaret performance acting she does lately in musical movies. This is the Cher that I like to see in movies, the ones what chew the scenery. And she did. She put heart and soul into this role. Eric Stoltz, yeah, it's one of his first movies. Unrecognizable with the makeup.
True.
I mean, he was the original Marty McFly, but it never happened. For some reason, Michael J. Fox took over the role. But as I said, Eric Stoltz went on to other good movies. So this is one of his most famous. Yeah, I loved everything about this, seeing as it's based on a true story. Because I know for a fact Rocky lived with his parents and half brother in real life, both parents, not just the mother. So there has been a few alterations, but it still works. The supporting characters are brilliant. You know, the biker gang. You have a few laughs along the way with them, especially is it Dozer with Big Dozer who leaves a puppy in Rocky's room, stuff like that. Laura Dern, absolutely brilliant. I think this was one of her first roles as well. It must have been. Yeah, it just blows you away, and it doesn't hide, as Alex said, it doesn't hide from the fact that the doctors, the medical side of it, wasn't very nice back in the day. They didn't understand things like they do now. But it tells the tale. It pulls on your heartstrings, and if you feel like, as Susan said, when she saw it one time, she was crying. That movie is doing a really good job. If it pulls on your emotions, it's done a good job. And it's warts and all, this movie. It's not, it doesn't sugarcoat anything, in my opinion. As like Alex said, certain movies do. This one didn't sugarcoat anything. So,
Well, yeah, if I may, Lee, I mean, there were other movies before this, like the William Rudolph Story and Elephant Man, and a couple other ones where again, it's tough. It's tough to say exactly what sugarcoating is versus not. What I was also emphasizing was, unfortunately, Tom Hanks and Sean Penn did play characters in the movie where they were sort of a little bit of a catchphrase. You know, it was a little bit more, even though it was a movie officially, it was a little bit more TV in the sense that it was more gimmicky. They had more catchphrases and stuff, where here they don't do that. So I think that's the other reason why it seems more realistic, because it's not as, super gimmicky or super, tick, where they, like you get a tick with a character where they do the same thing, 500 times in a row. Is it totally realistic? It probably isn't. Like you said, they left out the father, they left out the half brother. So we're not exactly sure what they didn't, what didn't happen. But it is somewhat accurate in the sense that it's not a wild, stylized, Forrest Gump type of thing. But that was a different era and a different time. But it was nice that they didn't show a disabled person or a person with a physical malady or person with a physical disability as, either too tough or too weak. And that was another problem with the 60s to the 80s, was they either showed somebody that was too aggressive or too passive. Right. And then Born on the 4th of July. Where it was a little too, a little too much of a catchphrase type of, like, Forrest Gump with the laugh is like, all that junk, which I understand that's part of his character, but the problem is it overshadows the film. It turns it into a gimmick, into a catchphrase. And if you're basing it on somebody's life, it shouldn't be a gimmick. It shouldn't be a cartoon. Yeah, it shouldn't be like a cartoon where they do the same thing, 500 times in a row. And the other nice thing was, even though there were parts in the movie where he had a bad day or he had a bad time, he was closer to a teenager. It wasn't that he was trying to take over or be smart alecky most of the time. He was just a normal teenager. Where it wasn't, where in other TV shows it was very catchphrase. It was very, they'll do the same thing 500 times. So I think that's why this movie is liked, is because it feels more realistic. It doesn't feel like, let's glamorize this, or let's make him weak, or let's make him, do the same thing 500 times in a row. He's more of he feels like a person. He doesn't feel like a gimmick or a cartoon character. And a lot of the other people in the movie feel realistic as well. And I think that's why this movie works, is that you feel like you're watching real people. You don't feel like you're just watching, oh, the producer wants me to feel a certain way, so now this is going to happen in the movie.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. So, any things what stand out for you, or things what you wasn't too keen on?
Let's see. I'm gonna say that the things that I really enjoyed about this movie were I love the the singing and stuff, the campfire bonfire type sing along, and I loved the sweetness of it. I loved the fact that that Rocky tutored people in high school. I mean, like, that was fun. And I love that his principal was like, right beside him and trying to build him up. I mean, that was different from my experience in the 80s. My principal was not always on my side. And let's see, I loved it when Estelle Getty and the other fellow showed up, his grandparents, and they were like, "Oh my gosh, it's her." That's funny.
And was that the same? Was this the same year she started Golden Girls?
I don't know. It could be.
85, 86, I think, Golden
It
Girls.
could be. Oh my gosh. And yet she played a young grandmother in this and like a really old grandmother in that.
Yeah.
But wow, fun to see her. And yeah, so those are my moments. Here's Alex.
Yeah, I mean, again, he obviously had, there was like two scenes. The scene with the buddy that he kind of, said, "Oh, you're stupid," and blah, blah, blah.
Oh.
And then the other scene in the funhouse mirror, yeah, that kind of took away for a moment from the realism of it. Because if you're looking in a funhouse mirror, it's not going to make him look like a rocker or a biker. Meanwhile, Cher's face is completely undistorted. So there was a little bit of leeway there.
Not like today with her face being distorted, of course.
Well, again, she's not 20 or 30 anymore either. Again, though, I mean, I think the main point of this movie was to show that, there is warts and all. He wasn't a stereotype. He wasn't a catchphrase. He wasn't doing gimmicky stuff. And I think that's kind of the point of the movie, is that, he did try to excel. He did try to live his life. He was nice to people. Yeah, he was worried, as all people with a disability or physical disability are worried about, are they attractive? Can they attract a mate? Do they have to pay, for love? Do they have to pay for sex? So in that sense, the movie is kind of realistic in that. And again, they do show them arguing. There's a little bit of dramatics with breaking glasses and breaking dishes and things, and a little slight slapping as well. But like I said, considering how, for instance, TV shows would be a lot more gimmicky. Yeah.
But like you were saying, they didn't turn the biker gang into a gimmick either, because they didn't put guns in their hands, and she was the one out looking for drugs, not the gang of bikers. Yeah. So I mean, even that, you're right about all of this.
It's okay, but like I said, it's not perfect at all. But if it encourages people to do sort of a more realistic, grounded, or mostly grounded, question about disability. Now, I know there's been last 15 years they've had to change and do more mental based movies. Not much comes to mind, but I do know from a few reviews and other of the other movies, like the ones with Jodie Foster or other actors, they were slightly more gimmicky. And at the same point, I don't want to say that they can't do any gimmicky stuff, but yeah, this was a more realistic movie, a more grounded movie than what you had usually seen before, with the exception of maybe a Patch of Blue, the movie with Sidney Poitier. I think maybe I have the title slightly wrong, and The Miracle Worker as well. But again, people have to remember this is before the time of X-rays, MRIs, scopes of all kinds that you can fit in the nose without any trouble. This is before all that. This is before you could. But even if you have an operation, there's no guarantee it'll work or be successful. But it was definitely before operations could be done in 5 minutes or 20 minutes. Back then, a lot of operations took a day, if not more, and the recovery time was a lot worse. So again, its heart is in the right place. It does. It does pull at the heartstrings, but it's not a huge crescendo. It's not, okay, now you cry, now you feel bad for the character, or the character's perfect, or the character's gimmicky, or the character is a cartoon character. Yeah, I would have liked the movie to have covered a little bit more. I could have dealt with a couple of more characters. But again, this was also the days of a movie going anywhere from $1 to $6 million. So they had to make choices too. And this isn't Gandhi, where a movie is 3 to 4 hours long. And there was a little bit of leeway taken on that movie as well. But like I said, I appreciate that it took sort of a mostly serious, not gimmicky, not cartoonish kind of approach. So I don't know how realistic it is, but I appreciate that it was trying to be as grounded as possible.
Thanks for that, you two. Yeah, for me, any scene with Cher and Eric Stoltz in it, just the way they acted together was just brilliantly done. And the way Eric portrayed Rocky is full of humour all the time. Nothing really got him down. Was really good. Also, the scenes with Cher and Sam Elliott together, they really, on the screen, they just work so well together on screen. It's a feel good movie in a strange sort of way because of what Rocky was going through. But you do feel at the end of it, it's sad that he passes away and all that, but you feel like these people. Some movies these days, as we said, you come away from a movie, you're thinking, well, I didn't feel anything for those characters, but you did feel you got to know these people. You felt for these people.
Yeah.
It's real the way if that comes across, it's the movie's doing some good. And I say Cher. I think she was nominated for an award for this, but I don't think she got it. I think the movie won the Academy Award for makeup and things like that. But it's if nobody's seen this movie, if you're watching this and you haven't seen this movie, I do recommend it. Even if you watch it once, just watch this movie, and you'll know what we're talking about here. It's a powerful drama. So anything else what anybody likes to say about this movie, or shall we go to final say?
Yeah, unfortunately it didn't get a lot of good reviews. I don't know if the material wasn't adult enough. I'm not sure. The movie, I think, was just under $5 million. I know they had some trouble with some of the music. They couldn't include it originally. Yeah, it wasn't given a lot of good reviews. I think people weren't ready for it. I think that's the other reason why the movie has lasted, because I think it took it took a point of view where it respected the characters, but it didn't glorify them. It showed them not perfect and all that. It wasn't as emotional. You didn't have this huge crescendo of music in the background at any time. You didn't have the, where you feel like, oh, this is the part where I should cry, or this is the part where I should be angry, or anything like that. So yeah, it didn't get a lot of good reviews. It was made cheaply, sort of. It wasn't even $6 million. It did make some of its money back. Yes, they should have won more awards for this movie. But I also think it was a surprise hit as well. And I think the other reason why this movie is good is not only the quasi-realistic and the characters that aren't too wild, but I also think it's because the movie is, not trying to hit all the notes to be gimmicky. And I think that's probably why there had been 80% movies that were a lot more gimmicky than this one. So I think that was the other. It was 85. It hasn't. Things have changed, thankfully. Things have changed. Most people are. Most people realize most people aren't supermodels. They might have something wrong with them, or they might have a condition, or they might have a genetic condition, which is what this was. And yeah, so I think that's why. But again, this movie has been re-released on DVD, so somebody likes it because they knew enough to put money behind it to get it re-released with more music.
And I don't really have anything sort of more to surrounding the movie.
So what in that case? So what would you give it? Could you score it, or do you think it's beyond scoring?
Well, in so many ways, it really had it really had a power that doesn't it doesn't a number really wouldn't work. I think it was for me it was a revelation into somebody who was quite lovely, quite lovely.
It was quite lovely, and according to this movie, he was well loved by everybody.
Yeah.
The biker gang, his mother, the kids at school.
Yeah.
He won them around.
Yeah.
Which it's you don't often get a movie like this.
Nope, you don't, do you?
No. I think I'm in agreement with that. The score to score this would be unfair. The movie.
So, do you have you owned this movie a long time, Lee?
I got this DVD. Maybe 4 years ago. 4 years ago.
Oh wow!
Because I remember I saw it first. I know because when this came out, I was only 15, so I didn't go to the cinema to see that. So I remember seeing it on TV at some point, and I saw it, and I thought, you know what, I'll buy that because I remember watching that and being quite moved by the movie.
Yeah.
So it's in my It's in my ever-growing collection. Yeah. One of these days, that's just going to fall right on top of me.
Well, Alex and I might get this movie at some point. But yeah, it was good of you to recommend it for this week.
Mm-hmm. Well, we did recommend it maybe a couple of months back, but it got put back, and we finally got that. Yeah. So
yeah.
We never.
I also think, with all due respect, I think that they should actually try to do more movies like this.
Yeah.
more varied as well.
Yeah.
And also mental and physical disabilities as well. I think the problem is they've gone now to all mental and kind of forgotten about the physical as well. And I understand that the decades change and certain movies, get hot or they have a gimmicky quality to them. I know some people that love Forrest Gump, not me. But like I said, I know that was based on a real person. Unfortunately, the story was not realistic. It wasn't exactly grounded. Um, but like I said, the other reason why we like this movie is the balance too. It's not too wild. It's not too calm. It's sort of
They've got the balance right in this movie.
ebb and flow. And I think that's the other issue is that maybe because of the internet or the TV show, the TV news, maybe people don't want to produce a movie about somebody having a disability without guaranteeing that the audience will see it. But
If there's a good story to be told,
yeah.
we should tell it.
Yeah, they should. But again, this wasn't a $10 million movie or, anything. And that's the other question too is why can't they just make good movies and, just use the budget that they can? Not everything has to be a blockbuster. Not everything has to be $600 million. Yeah. Yeah, not everything has to be $600 million. And plus, if you're going to waste the money or spend the money to do the movie anyway, why can't it be a really good movie or a really good story that might be enjoyed 20, 30, 50 years from now?
Exactly.
Opposed to we only care about maybe 2 to 10 years and then we're finding a new gimmick. I understand they have to do that. I'm not saying I can guarantee that they won't do that, but I think that
would it be good to see a movie about your particular?
I know they've done TV movies. I don't think they've done full feature movies about cerebral palsy because it's such a difficult condition. But again, that's a different condition. I'm not trying to talk about myself.
No, I was wondering.
But also now these days we do have the people demanding or demands. The demand's the wrong word, but stating that they shouldn't have able-bodied actors playing these parts.
That's a little tough.
I know.
I mean, again, the political correct, it's not totally wrong. Its heart is in the right place, but the method I question.
I'm only saying that because
I mean, what if?
Hang on.
What if it's so rare that there isn't anyone who's acting who has the same condition?
Again, yes and no. Again, even in the 90s, there were TV shows that were making fun of some of the 90s movies that were still very gimmicky. And again, there's a difference between a person having a tic and writing it too much into the movie where it seems to go on for 2 hours. I think that's the issue as well. Plus, like I said, you have the internet, you have the TV news, and they do show, unfortunately, people and the soldiers as well. That's another change from the 80s is that soldiers are more respected now, and it's more inclusive. Whereas from the 50s to the 70s, a lot of soldiers weren't respected because those two police actions or wars were not popular at all. But again, they still have to do a job and they're still risking their life, just like a policeman and a fireman are as well. Maybe they should do some more movies with policemen, firemen, and soldiers that have conditions. Unfortunately, the Born on the 4th of July was too gimmicky for me. There was too much grandstanding. I know their heart was in the right place, but it was too much of a grandstand. But like I said, the other issue is trying to explain conditions because some conditions are not easy to explain. I mean, even I don't know every physical malady or disability or whatever. Of course, the other good side, I'm almost done, is Marlee Matlin and other actresses that are deaf have had more exposure compared to the 1960s and the 1970s, where it still was very judgmental, very much, keep them away from us, You know, they have to go to one school. So you go from one extreme to the other. You go from the extreme where, you know, they're lucky if they're walking outside. I've talked to people that have physical disabilities in the 1940s and their life was a lot more, you know, unpleasant, and nobody wanted to help them and nobody cared, and they just went, you know, be on your way, be with your family, and, you know, we don't want to see you. As opposed to now where their heart's in the right place, but they might also be trying to make up, you know, it's good to look at history and it's good to want to change it, but you can't change, you can't change a war just because now 50 years later you didn't like it. You can't say, okay, you know, you can't say, well, you know, this what you can feel in your heart that maybe something was wrong or you didn't like the war. I mean, nobody really likes war with any brain. But the thing is, you can't erase the past either. So you can't change World War I and World War II just because 50, 60, 70 years later, you know, you may not like it. And I think that's the other point of this movie is that a lot of people in this movie kind of have a cross to bear. Just like that big burly guy that had a huge stutter. I knew somebody in Massachusetts. He looked like Christopher Reeve from the 80s, but he had a huge stutter. And he couldn't even date some women just couldn't put up with. They loved the way he looked on the outside, but they didn't like him on the inside, and they didn't like that stutter of his.
They didn't even know his.
Yeah, they didn't know. They didn't know him.
The
So that's the other question also about these movies. Like My Left Foot. I don't know if Lee saw that movie. I know that's a little different movie. That's a little bit based on cerebral palsy. And I do like the fact that he gets mad in the movie and says, you know, you're talking down to me or you're not treating me like an equal. So that part I agree with. I want more movies like that where they do admit in the movie, you know, that they're being patronized, they're being talked down to when they're human beings. They're not, you know. And I think that's what's missing is that you have to have a balance. And people have idiosyncrasies, they have faults. Even if you're an able-bodied person, you can have faults, you can have idiosyncrasies, you can have quirks, you can have faults. You know, so I think that's what's missing is as a balance of saying, you know, it's. Do you understand what I'm getting at?
Totally. I get where you're coming from. I really do. Yeah. It's one of those things that you have to. There's two sides to this. You know, some people want able-bodied actors to play these parts, and no, you need proper disabled people to play these parts. It's a very rough ground to be treaded on this because good we're talking about it. That's right, Susan. I know. I can see what their eyes are doing behind them glasses.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, but I'm not. You know, again, I don't know if it's entirely realistic to say, well, because somebody's this or somebody's that. It should be based on the character and the story and how the film is directed and done. I don't want 10,000 versions of me on TV or a movie. But it would be nice in the 50 years that I'm living to have a story I can somewhat relate to. But they don't have to look exactly like me. At the same point, I don't want them to look like, you know, it's a little too obvious that they're a movie star, you know,
True.
playing a disabled person to get an Oscar. So it's a very fine line of, you know, you know, having a movie and whether it is going to be trying to be an indie movie or down to earth, or if it's going to be, you know, a huge showpiece with grand music and, you know, $10 billion. I think you have to sort of have a balance here. And I think that's what's kind of missing is a balance here.
Yeah, and this is what this movie had. They had the balance right. We had a good discussion on this one, but we're gonna come to a close on this now.
Okay.
I always like our discussions because we always go sometimes off on a tangent, but we always come back. we go around in, you know, a long way around. So I'd like to thank you two for joining us talking about Mask. Really enjoyed our talk today. you guys out there, that's it. Give him a pat on the back, Susan. You guys out there, please leave a comment below. If you want to join our casts or our groups, just let us know. Leave us a message. We're on Facebook. We're on Twitter. Just leave a little message, and we'll see what we can do. So until next time, bye bye.